Let's talk about something that anime does better than literally any other medium, making characters ridiculously old. Like, we're not talking about, oh, this vampire is 300 years old but looks 16 old. We're talking about characters who are older than the universe itself. And here's the thing, anime just casually drops these characters into stories like it's no big deal. You'll have a show where the protagonist is fighting some ancient evil, and then you find out this villain has been alive for 75 million years, and you're just supposed to accept that and move on. So today we're ranking the oldest characters in anime, and trust me, by the end of this list, your brain is going to hurt trying to wrap itself around these timescales. We're starting at 1,000 years and working our way up to, well, you'll see. Let's go. We're starting relatively tame with Holo the Wise Wolf from Spice and Wolf, who's been around for over 500 years. Now, 500 years is nothing compared to where we're going, but let's appreciate this for a second. Holo was already ancient when Columbus sailed to America. She was old when the printing press was invented. She's seen empires rise and fall. And what does she do with all this wisdom and experience? She travels around with a merchant, teases him constantly, and gets drunk on fancy alcohol. Honestly, that's the dream. If I lived for 500 years, I'd also just want to vibe and eat good food. But here's what makes Holo interesting. She acts her age. She's genuinely wise. She understands economics, human nature, and the way societies work because she's watched them for centuries. She's not just immortal waifu with no personality. She's a character whose age actually matters to who she is. Also, she's a wolf deity, which is cool, but compared to everyone else on this list, she's basically a baby. A 500-year-old baby, which is wild to say. Anyway, moving on, next up is Muzan Kibutsuji from Demon Slayer, who's been terrorizing Japan for about 1,000 years. Muzan is the first demon, the original, patient zero of the demon apocalypse, and he's spent the last millennium being an absolute menace to society, turning people into demons, hunting down anyone who gets close to killing him, and generally being the worst. 1,000 years is a long time. When Muzan became a demon, samurai were just becoming a thing. The Mongol invasions hadn't happened yet. Feudal Japan was still figuring itself out, and in all that time, Muzan has learned absolutely nothing. He's still the same paranoid, murderous, ego-driven maniac he was 1,000 years ago. Character growth? Never heard of her. But you gotta respect the longevity. This man has been the main villain for an entire millennium. That's commitment. Although, let's be real, 1,000 years is nothing compared to what's coming. Muzan's basically a spring chicken in the grand scheme of anime ages. Now we're getting into the deep lore with Ymir Fritz from Attack on Titan, who's been dead for about 2,000 years, but is still arguably the most important character in the entire series. Ymir was the first Titan shifter, the founder, the origin of all the nightmare fuel that is the Titan power. And even though she died 2,000 years ago, her influence has shaped everything in the Attack on Titan world. Here's the messed up part. Ymir didn't just die and rest in peace. Nah, she's been stuck in this weird afterlife dimension, the Paths, where she's been building titans out of sand for 2 millennia, 2,000 years of manual labor in purgatory for a king who treated her like garbage. That's not immortality, that's a prison sentence. And honestly, it makes her one of the most tragic characters on this list. But 2,000 years is still nothing. We're barely getting started. Meliodas from the 7 Deadly Sins has been alive for 3,000 years. And honestly, he's had a rough time. See, Meliodas is cursed. Every time he dies, he resurrects. Sounds great, right? Immortality without consequences? Wrong, because every time he comes back, he loses a chunk of his emotions, his humanity, his sense of self. He's been dying and resurrecting for 3,000 years, slowly becoming less and less human with each cycle. Oh, and his girlfriend is also cursed. Every time she dies, she gets reincarnated with no memories of him, and then she remembers who she is, and then she dies again. And Meliodas has to watch this happen over and over for 3,000 years. That's not a love story, that's torture. This man has been emotionally traumatized for longer than recorded human history. But hey, at least he's still got his sense of humor and his abs. 3,000 years and he's still ripped. That's dedication to the gym. Pharaoh Atem from Yu-Gi-Oh! Has been dead for somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 years, and he spent most of that time trapped inside a puzzle. Let me repeat that. He was stuck in a puzzle for 5,000 years. No Netflix, no snacks, no bathroom breaks, just puzzle prison for millennia. And when he finally gets out, what does he do? He plays children's card games. Because of course he does. This is Yu-Gi-Oh! But let's give Atem credit. He ruled ancient Egypt, fought shadow demons, saved the world from dark magic, and then willingly sealed himself away to protect humanity. That's pretty heroic. Also, the fact that he immediately adapted to modern technology and card game rules after being dead for 5,000 years is impressive. Most people can't figure out how to use a new phone after a week, okay? Senku from Dr. Stone is technically only 17 years old, but he was petrified, turned to stone, for 3,700 years, so he didn't age. But 3,700 years passed, which means he's technically been around for almost 4 millennia, even if his body is still that of a teenager. Here's the crazy part. Senku was conscious the entire time. For 3,700 years, he counted every single second to keep himself from going insane. That's 116,755,200,000 seconds, by the way, and he counted all of them. This man has more patience than anyone on this list, and when he finally breaks free, he immediately starts rebuilding civilization from scratch, using nothing but science and sheer willpower. Senku is the only character on this list whose age is a direct result of being really stubborn. Respect Tet from No Game. No Life is the god of games, and he's been ruling over Disboard, a world where everything is decided by games, for over 6,000 years. 6,000 years of playing games. That's it. That's his job. And honestly, that sounds exhausting. Imagine playing Monopoly for 6,000 years. You'd lose your mind, but Tet loves it. He created an entire world where disputes are settled by rock, paper, scissors, chess, video games, you name it. No war, no violence, just games. And he's been the undefeated champion for 6,000 years. Nobody's been able to beat him until Sora and Shiro show up, of course. Because anime protagonists are built different. But yeah, 6,000 years of gaming, that's a lot of hours logged. Someone check his Steam account. Now we're getting into the really old stuff. Orsted from Mushoku Tensei is 22,000 years old. 22,000 years. This man was alive when woolly mammoths were still walking around. He predates agriculture. He's older than civilization itself. Orsted is also stuck in a time loop, which means he's lived through the same timeline multiple times. So not only is he 22,000 years old, but he's experienced that time over and over and over. That's enough to make anyone grumpy, and Orsted is grumpy. This man has seen everything, knows everything, and is just exhausted by existence at this point. Honestly, relatable. If I lived for 22,000 years, I'd also be tired of everyone's nonsense. But here's where things get crazy, because 22,000 years is nothing compared to what's coming next. Demigra from Dragon Ball Xenoverse is 75 million years old. 75 million. That's older than the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. This man existed before the dinosaurs went extinct. He was around when T-Rexes were still stomping around Earth. Like, what do you even do for 75 million years? Read? Work out? Contemplate the futility of existence? Demigra spent most of that time sealed away, which honestly sounds boring. But when he breaks free, he immediately tries to rewrite time itself, because why not? If you've been alive for 75 million years, you've earned the right to cause chaos. But we're not even close to the top yet. Beerus, the god of destruction from Dragon Ball Super, is 200 million years old. 200 million. At this point, we've left human comprehension behind. Beerus is older than mammals. He's older than flowering plants. He was alive during the Triassic period. And what does he do with all this time? Sleep, eat, destroy planets when he's bored. Honestly, for a being that's 200 million years old, Beerus is shockingly chill. He's not trying to conquer the universe or achieve ultimate power. He just wants good food and naps. If I lived for 200 million years, I'd also spend most of it asleep. That's valid, but believe it or not, we're still not at the top. Guy Crimson from That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime is over 250 million years old. This man is older than dinosaurs. He's older than Pangea. He was around when Earth was one giant supercontinent, and he's been one of the most powerful beings in existence that entire time. For 250 million years, Guy Crimson has been at the top of the food chain. That's not just immortality, that's dominance. This man has ruled for longer than complex life has existed on Earth, and somehow he's still interesting, still has a personality, still gets involved in politics and fights and drama. After 250 million years, you'd think he'd be bored, but nope, he's still out here causing problems. Respect the hustle, okay? Kaguya from Naruto doesn't have an exact age, but she's been around for thousands of years, possibly tens of thousands. She's an alien. She came to Earth, ate a chakra fruit, became the progenitor of all ninjutsu, and then got sealed away for millennia. And when she comes back, she's immediately the strongest character in the series. No training, no power-ups. She's just built different because she's ancient. Kaguya represents the scariest type of immortal, the one who's been alive so long that they've become incomprehensible. She doesn't think like humans. She doesn't act like humans. She's something else entirely, and that's terrifying. Hades from Record of Ragnarok is 13.8 billion years old. That's the age of the universe. This man has existed since the Big Bang. He's older than stars. He's older than galaxies. He's older than time itself in some interpretation. At this point, calling him old feels disrespectful. He's not old. He's eternal. eternal. And somehow, he still cares about human drama. After 13.8 billion years, you'd think he'd be beyond caring about anything. But nope, he's still fighting gods and humans in tournaments. That's commitment. Arceus from Pokemon is older than the universe. Let me say that again. Older than the universe. Arceus created the Pokemon universe. Time, space, matter, all of it. Arceus made it all. This isn't even an age anymore. This is beyond comprehension. Arceus exists outside of time, before time, after time. Calling Arceus old is like calling the ocean damp. It's technically true, but it doesn't capture the scale. And what does Arceus do with all this cosmic power? Hangs out in a temple and occasionally helps some kid on their Pokemon journey. Truly the most chill god in existence. And finally, we reach the top. Zeno, the Omni King from Dragon Ball Super. Zeno is timeless. He doesn't have an age. He exists outside of time. He predates existence itself. He can erase universes with a thought. He's the most powerful being in all of Dragon Ball, and nothing comes close. Zeno is what happens when you take immortality to its absolute extreme. He's not just old. He's beyond old. He's beyond everything. And the craziest part, he acts like a child. After existing for literally forever, Zeno just wants to watch cool fights and make friends. Honestly, that's kind of beautiful. Even something as incomprehensibly ancient as Zeno still finds joy in simple things. Alright, before we wrap this up, let's talk about something interesting. Which of these ancient characters do people actually like? Because here's the thing, being old doesn't automatically make you a good character. Some of these immortals are beloved by fans. Others, not so much. So I went through fan polls, reviews, and community discussions to see which of these ancient beings actually resonated with people. And the results are wild. Let's start with the ones people love to hate. Poor Muzan. This guy's been alive for 1,000 years and somehow became one of the most hated villains in anime. Not because he's evil. People love evil villains. No, Muzan's hated because he's a coward. Fans consistently rank him as one of the worst main antagonists because despite being 1,000 years old, he acts like a paranoid child. One reviewer said, Muzan's 1,000 years old but has the emotional maturity of a toddler throwing a tantrum. And honestly, facts. He spends the entire series running away, making other people fight for him, and killing his own subordinates when they fail. For a character who's supposed to be the ultimate threat, he's surprisingly pathetic. The fandom consensus, Muzan wasted 1,000 years and learned nothing. Moving on. Now Meliodas is interesting because fan opinion is split down the middle. Half the fandom loves him. They think his 3,000-year tragic love story with Elizabeth is beautiful and heartbreaking. The curse angle, watching your girlfriend die over and over for 3 millennia, hits hard for a lot of people. But the other half, they can't stand him, mostly because of the uncomfortable comedy. You know what I'm talking about. The groping, the pervy jokes, stuff that feels real weird when you remember this dude is 3,000 years old harassing a 16-year-old body. One fan comment summed it up perfectly. Meliodas would be a top-tier character if the author didn't write him like a creep. So yeah, Meliodas is divisive. Tragic backstory, amazing. Everything else, questionable. Senku from Dr. Stone, on the other hand, is almost universally loved. Fans respect the absolute determination it took to stay sane for 3,700 years. The fact that he counted every second, 116 billion of them, just to keep his mind intact is genuinely impressive. But what people really love about Senku is that his age didn't make him jaded or cruel. He woke up after almost 4,000 years and immediately got to work saving humanity. No revenge arc. No humanity doesn't deserve to be saved nonsense. Just pure determination. One highly upvoted comment said, Senku is 3,700 years old and still more optimistic about humanity than I am after one bad day at work. The consensus? Senku used his time wisely. He's the immortal we all wish we could be. Tet from No Game. No Life has a fascinating reputation in the anime community. People love him because after 6,000 years of existence, he's not some brooding, serious deity. He's playful, he's having fun. He created an entire world based on games because he thought it would be entertaining. Fans consistently say Tet is the kind of god they'd actually want to meet. No grand prophecies. No, you must save the world nonsense. Just, hey, wanna play a game? One fan wrote, Tet's been alive for 6,000 years, and his biggest priority is making sure everyone's having a good time. That's the energy we need. He's not the most powerful on this list, but he might be the most likable. Beerus, the sleepy cat everyone adores. Beerus is 200 million years old and somehow one of the most beloved Dragon Ball characters. Why? Because he's relatable. Despite being a god who can destroy planets, Beerus just wants good food and naps. Fans love that after 200 million years, he's not trying to prove anything. He's just vibing. Reddit threads about Beerus are full of comments like, Beerus has the right idea. If I live lived for 200 million years. I'd also spend most of it sleeping and eating. And his relationship with Whis, peak content. These two have been together for millions of years, and their dynamic is just grumpy cat and his patient butler. It's wholesome. The Dragon Ball fandom agrees. Beerus is proof that you can be unimaginably ancient and still be fun to watch. Now let's talk about Holo, because despite being the youngest on this list at 500 years, she might be the most beloved. Spice and Wolf fans are passionate about Holo, like genuinely ride or die for this character, and it's because her age actually matters to her character. She's wise but playful, ancient but curious. She's lived for centuries, but she hasn't become cold or detached. She still cares about people. She still wants companionship. One popular fan essay described her as the perfect example of how to write an immortal character who feels real. And the romance between her and Lawrence? Fans call it one of the best in anime because it's built on mutual respect and genuine emotional connection, not just ooh ancient waifu. The verdict? Holo proves you don't need to be a billion years old to be an S-tier character. Here's a surprise. Orsted from Mushoku Tensei is becoming a massive fan favorite, and it's not because he's likable, it's because he's terrifying in the most compelling way. Orsted is 22,000 years old and stuck in a time loop, which means he's experienced the same events hundreds of times, and fans are obsessed with how this has shaped him. He's not evil, but he's so far beyond normal morality that he's incomprehensible. One fan described him as, what happens when you live so long that empathy becomes optional. But here's why people love him. Despite everything, Orsted still has goals. He's still working towards something. After 22,000 years, he hasn't given up. The Mushoku Tensei community genuinely debates whether Orsted is a villain or a hero, and that ambiguity is what makes him fascinating. Okay, we have to talk about Zeno's reputation because it's hilarious. The Dragon Ball fandom has collectively decided that despite being the most powerful, timeless, reality-warping entity in existence, Zeno is a baby who must be protected at all costs. Fan art of Zeno? Wholesome. Memes about Zeno? Adorable. Discussions about Zeno? Everyone agrees he's too precious for this world. One popular meme summarizes it. Zeno can erase universes but would cry if you didn't invite him to your birthday party. And honestly, that's beautiful. The most ancient being on this list, something that exists outside of time itself, and fans just want to give him juice boxes and let him watch cartoons. The consensus, even cosmic gods deserve friends. So there you have it. 15 characters who are so old that calling them ancient feels like an insult. We went from Holo's 500 years, which feels quaint now, all the way to Zeno, who exists outside of time itself. Anime doesn't mess around with immortality. Other shows will give you a vampire who's 200 years old and act like that's impressive. Anime said, cool, here's a guy who's 250 million. And honestly, I love it. There's something fascinating about characters who have lived for incomprehensible amounts of time. How do they stay sane? How do they find meaning? What do you even do after a billion years? Different characters answer that differently. Some sleep, some fight, some play games, some just vibe, but they all keep going. And that's kind of inspiring in a weird way. Drop a comment and let me know. If you could live forever, what would you do? And how long do you think it would take before you got bored? Smash that like button, subscribe for more anime deep dives, and I'll see you in the next one.